Hey everyone, welcome back. We said that if there was any more questions to answer, we would, and we have a couple right here. And Dwayne right here is going to answer them for us.
Okay,
Are you
let's
ready?
go for it.
Okay. I was going to ask you if you're ready, but
I'm ready, obviously.
you're ready.
We hope.
You're more ready than me. No. So this first question is this tax fair? And I'm thinking is it fair for the people in the city? Is it fair for the people that own property that live outside of the city?
Yeah, actually, when I first saw this tax, I kind of went, this is kind of a classic example of taxation without representation. You know, as an American, that doesn't sit very well with me. You know, one of the cries of the Revolutionary War was taxation without representation. And in this case, you have the people that live here that can vote, and we're taxing people that own land that don't live here. So there's this taxation without representation. But if you think back to the Revolutionary War, they said that was the case, but at the time you had women didn't have the right to vote, slaves didn't have the right to vote, children didn't have the right to vote, and they still don't, right? But we assume, at that time, they assumed that the landowner, which were the only ones that had the right to vote, would vote considering their interest and the interests of the family and the slaves and such. And so we have kind of that situation. Well, it's backward, isn't it?
Well, yeah, no. This is a tax on properties.
The landowners are the ones that don't get to vote
Yeah.
because the shift has been made that says, oh, all the individuals have the right to vote, and it's not based on property. Kind of interesting reversal. So in the same as it was then, we have to vote kind of considering not just us, but how does this handle the interests of the landowners and such that don't have the right to vote. So that's one of the aspects that I would say, no, it's not fair, but it's what we have, so we have to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to give them the right to vote. We really don't want to because they don't live here. They're not deeply invested. They have some money invested, but they're not deeply invested in the city, and we don't want them voting about things that primarily impact us.
Right.
When they really are disinterested parties. So we have to do the same thing. We have to pay some respect for their interests.
Yeah, we got to think about them and stuff. And
Right.
specifically this being a public safety thing, I mean,
Right.
it is important for everybody's property to have safety.
Yeah, in fact, there's another aspect of this of fairness. You know, the taxes aren't fair. They never have been. There have always been people, you know, certain groups that benefit big from the tax, and then others that don't benefit very much, and some that really probably don't benefit much at all, right? And that's probably the best example I have of that was my grandparents. They moved up to Morro Bay when they retired, right? And they moved rural area, two houses on the street, and then suddenly all these young families started moving in. They found this area, and this is great. We're going to move here and raise our families. And then they got this special assessment put against their property to build schools because they had all these kids in the neighborhood. They went, hey, wait a minute. You know, we paid for all that where we used to live. Now we've retired, we moved here. All our kids are grown. It's not fair we have to pay for these schools. And they're right, it wasn't fair. Now, did it work out for them in the long run? Yeah, I think so, because you know, because there were schools, there was more demand, more people moved in. You got congestion, which they were, kind of wanted to get away from. But properties values went up. They had the house they built. They sold that. They built another house. Eventually, I don't remember if they sold that or not. But they had bought another piece of property next to their house, and then eventually they sold that because they needed the money. It helped them, you know, to last out their retirement. So it worked out well for them. So, in the property value.
Even if they didn't want it at the beginning, in the long run, it benefited them.
Right. And that's kind of how these things are. You vote as a city, as a community, and the idea is you have things that benefit everybody. You know, even if they don't benefit you a lot individually, they benefit the community and they're good for the community.
Right.
Right? Not everybody uses the library, but we like having libraries, right?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I hope I never get a benefit from this. I hope my house never catches fire and I never call the fire department. I hope we're never broken into or violated in some way and we call the police. This is really unfair for me and I never get any benefit. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to pay for it. So
well, hopefully our property values will go up. Too.
That's a whole nother issue. But.
So our next question is, and I think it's a pretty good follow-up question. Are there any negatives or downsides to this tax?
That's a good question. That's any law that's passed. Laws are kind of like drugs, It's you see these commercials, it's to remedy this, and then here's all the side effects. Yeah, laws are like that too. You pay attention to the initial intent that's good, and then you say, what are all the side effects? Mm-hmm. And there are some. In this case, we're passing a law that has a 6-year limit. Right. Because we citizens said we don't want to commit to this long term because we're supposed to have all this industry that's going to develop and carry the tax base. But that's been the case in the past, right? And it hasn't happened. There's kind of much more promise of it happening now with the medical marijuana and all of that, but it may not. Like I said before, there's a good chance it's not going to happen at the level that people predict. So there's a good possibility that 6 years from now, we're going through this whole thing of the city going, our budget's going to be cut in half, or maybe it's only by a quarter then. Mm-hmm. And, how are we going to do? We got to pass another tax. And people saying, I thought that was a temporary tax. Why are we, So it's been a big hassle going through this. And it makes it unstable for the city. They have difficulty planning long term because they don't know if, in another 2 years, they're going to cut their staff by 25 or 50%. So that's a real limitation. It's a side effect, right? Another is we put into this idea along the same lines that as these taxes come in, that we're going to, instead of putting those into the general fund, right, that we're going to use that to reduce this special parcel tax. 90% of the additional monies that come in from new taxes will go to reduce the parcel tax. What that means is we've pretty much locked ourselves into 6 years of no significant improvement in the city, at least based on the government.
Right, because any of the new tax that's coming in is going towards the parcel tax, which is to fund public safety.
Right. And, we had people complaining saying, I've lived here for 30 years and nothing ever gets better. And on one of the earlier videos, I said, yeah, because this money was going to, public safety, not for improvements. But now we've pretty much guaranteed that over the next 6 years, that no money will go to expand the general fund and give us general improvements. They're only going to be going to reduce our personal taxes.
Yes.
So to me, that's a negative. We've kind of locked ourselves in to this stagnant situation that we've been in for a long time, that we're just getting by and we're not actually improving. So those are the two kind of negatives I see. They're side effects, the fact that your taxes go down, that's a personal benefit, right? Yeah. But it's creating this other side effect.
Right. Well, I hope you guys understood, the questions that were asked, the answers that were given, that you have a little more clear understanding of what's going on in the city and how this tax is actually working within the city. We learned a little bit more about the tax and how it is working with the different side effects that are going to be happening.
Yeah, and there's probably some we haven't anticipated. We just don't know. But
right.
So anyway, if you have additional questions, we'd love to hear them. Remember that the election on this is July 31st, and if you haven't registered to vote, you need to get that done by the 16th, and you can pick up a form at the post office. Anything else?
That's it. We'll see you at the polls.
All right.